getting the band back together. That's what U2 lead singer Bono has proposed with our special contributor Larry Summers. It turns out that they worked together back when Larry was President Clinton's Secretary of the Treasury, and Bono got a meeting with him to talk about relieving the debt of the poorest countries around the world, something Larry discussed from his point of view on Wall Street Week back at the end of last year.
Bono is an unlikely but very close friend. I will confess it, I'd never heard of him before we had our meeting, and Sheryl Sandberg had to force me to take the meeting because I thought secretaries of the Treasury should only meet with people who had a first name and a last name. But he was mesmerizing both in his charisma and his knowledge.
Well, last week, Larry and Bono teamed up once again in an op-ed for the Washington Post, making the case for doing it all again, but bigger. And so we turned to Larry Summers this week for our One More Thought.
23 years ago, at the time of the millennium, Bono and I got together because at that time, Africa's economic prospects and poorest countries outside of Africa looked very dim because of the debt burdens. Today, the problems are much graver than they were then. The great news is that we have staggering capacities with technology to address these problems of a kind we could not have imagined a decade ago. We couldn't have imagined that a vaccine could be created in a year against a new disease. We could not imagine that in many parts of the country, solar electricity was going to be cheaper, in the world, solar electricity was going to be cheaper than coal electricity. But if these technologies are going to find application, we need to take the flow of capital to the global south, to developing countries up by a dimensional factor, not just in an incremental way. That's ultimately why Bono and I are back at it. That's why millions of other people have expressed concern. And gosh, I'm worried when it's great to have 13,000 word communiques as the G20 did, in which everybody pats everybody on the back and they talk about coordinating to cooperating, cooperating to coordinate, and so forth. But this is a moment when show me the money, when we need to move, we need to deploy resources, we need to act boldly. If you look at history with respect to gathering storms of all kinds, there have been many more mistakes of dithering for too long than there have been of moving too quickly. And I think it's one of those moments.
That's Bono's erstwhile bandmate, Larry Summers, getting their band back together again.